Welcome back, everyone. This is Shields, and today we are going to react to why couldn't the Romans conquer Scotland? Okay, so we've already done why could they not conquer Germania and Ireland, and we also did a video where we explained the Roman Empire in 20 minutes. So go watch those if you want to catch up. But let's talk about Scotland. Scotland, of course, today is part of the United Kingdom, but historically has been their own sovereign nation for the longest of times. The Scots. Of course, the Roman Empire stretched from Iberia, Morocco, all the way to Turkey, and as far as Britannia, and right at the Scottish border at their the height. But why did they never beat the Scots? I think that's what we're going to learn today, and really just going to understand why. What really happened. Was it a resourcing problem? Was it just the times things happening back home in the Italian peninsula that needed more support? We don't really know. So we're going to learn today together. If you like these types of videos, hit the subscribe button. Let's jump into it.
Julius Agricola. Gnaeus Julius Agricola.
I forget what Gnaeus means. Gnaeus is like a title, like great is, but I can't remember what the Gnaeus means. Is Gnaeus great? I don't know.
Would make a name for himself, etched forever in the history books as the Roman who conquered Caledonia. Though he didn't fully seize what we know today as Scotland, his invasion would prove to be a significant event in both Roman and Scottish history.
So he never got the Highlands, as you can tell here. Okay, Caledonia is what it's called.
For many years after. Governor of Britain and a seasoned military commander, Agricola was a man of a few goals.
Then Londinium?
First, in the late 70s AD, he focused his military efforts on strengthening the Roman grip over Wales. He soon turned to England with the same intentions, but by this point in time, Scotland was yet to succumb to a Roman assault. Thus, Agricola sought to change that fact by launching his own invasion into Caledonia immediately after his success.
So it is Caledonia. Okay.
In Wales and England. At first, the native tribes put up a respectable fight, and even launched a nighttime attack on Rome's Legio IX Hispana, although this ambush was broken down by Agricola's order to send in the cavalry for backup. Despite routes,
and obviously the Romans should be outmatching these tribes in terms of warfare, in terms of tactics, in terms of men, in terms of technology. So it's always like one of those weird things where guerrilla warfare has always been one of the main things that beat bigger opponents. So how much of guerrilla warfare played in part of this?
Down by Agricola's order to send in the cavalry for backup. Despite routing the Caledonians in this instance, however, the natives had amassed an army estimated to have contained roughly 30,000 troops.
Okay.
These forces were numerically capable of going toe-to-toe with Agricola's forces of similar manpower, but the Caledonians knew that the Romans would prove superior in an all-out battle.
Of course, more resourcing over time.
Subsequently, the former attempted to maintain a guerrilla strategy as opposed
I didn't pre-watch this.
to fighting a pitched battle. This wish of the Caledonians nevertheless would not come true due to Agricola's tactic of capturing Caledonian storehouses and essentially forcing his opponents to either fight or starve to death.
It's like a blockade. Like a blockade or a siege of some sort.
Of course, they preferred not to starve. Agricola would come face to face with his counterpart, Calgacus, at the Battle of Mons Graupius in 83 AD, as the massive Caledonian force clashed with that of the Romans. While the natives put up a considerable fight once again, the Romans found fairly swift victory, as over half of the Caledonian army fled, whilst the rest were slain in battle.
Wow.
By now, the Romans had pushed far north into Caledonia, farther than
That's a lot of territory
any of the previous governors had ventured to do. But it's speculated that this remarkable success from Agricola may have actually been the exact reason why Emperor Domitian recalled him from Britain in 85 AD, preventing the complete subjugation.
Called him back. Why would he call him back? Whether it be to divert him to another area that he believed that he would fit.
Of the Caledonians, as this would have too greatly overshadowed Domitian's own wins over in Germany. Following Agricola's departure from the British Isles, vast swaths of Roman troops were withdrawn from the Scottish territories as the Romans retreated to a previously established border in response to a need to send forces elsewhere.
The Dacians.
Crushing defeats in modern-day Transylvania required Rome to shift its focus and, at least for the time being, leave Caledonia alone once more. The Dacian War was on the horizon, and Scotland simply wasn't a high
Not Dacian, it's Dacian. Okay.
enough priority, especially given how viciously the native tribes continued to fight back. Additionally, there wasn't a very strong motivation for the Romans to risk resources and manpower for Caledonia. Economically, there were potentially some possible benefits due to the availability of certain natural resources throughout the Scottish lands,
Silver and gold?
such as silver and gold, if the Romans could truly subdue the Caledonians. Furthermore, there was the potential for taxing a whole new land of people. However, while Scotland did have
Emperor Hadrian's Wall.
some untapped resources, it wasn't necessarily rich in them, nor did it seem likely that the Romans could ever fully subdue the local tribes. This meant that putting more effort into truly conquering Caledonia wouldn't entirely be a lost cause, and could end up being a rewarding one, but it wouldn't be easy, and Rome had to focus elsewhere for the time being. That is, of course, until a new ruler came to the throne and decided to reconsider. Lucius Septimus Severus was the next of the Romans who hoped to
He was definitely a Slytherin back in the day, his house.
wrangle the Caledonians. Over his early years as emperor of the Roman Empire, in Roman Britain, the unconquered northern tribes were becoming increasingly combative, and raids on Roman-controlled territories were beginning to become more and more frequent. The Caledonians were essentially taking advantage of a newly developed weakness in Rome's British defenses that had developed after the rebellion of Governor Claudius Albinus against Septimus Severus back in 195 AD. Although Albinus would be dealt with by the emperor, by the time the troops he'd utilized were sent back to their posts in Britain, massive casualties meant that the Hadrian Wall and general Roman defenses were dangerously undermanned. Eventually, in 207 AD, the new governor of Roman Britain, Senecio, sent a letter to the emperor warning him that the remaining Roman defenses may not manage to hold back the Caledonians for much longer. A year later, Septimus Severus and 50,000 men landed on British soil. Upon arrival, the emperor led his troops up to the Hadrian.
That's interesting. How many emperors would do this? Like, were a lot of the emperors this hands-on? I know Julius was prior, and he wasn't really an emperor yet, but yeah.
Hadrian Wall, where the first priority was to fortify it. Next, Severus moved north to capture the territory between the current border at the Hadrian Wall and the old border of the Antonine Wall, which he did successfully. Now strengthening the new old border, the emperor had his eyes pointed farther north, looking along a similar path as the one taken by Agricola. Following in his footsteps, however, would not be as simple for Severus as he may have hoped. Despite the sudden arrival with a mass of troops for what was likely an attempt at a shock and awe campaign, the Caledonians had not been deterred and still knew better than to face the Romans in any pitched battles. Guerrilla warfare abounded, and the local tribes were remarkably good at it. The Romans quickly took heavy casualties, and the emperor was forced to re-strategize. Thus, his new plan was a bit tamer. Now Severus aims to recapture all of the forts Agricola had previously held and essentially employ a scorched earth policy everywhere else. Rome's new strategy actually seemed to have somewhat of an effect on the Caledonians, as many of the tribes now proposed peace talks with their invaders in hopes of preventing total destruction of their own land and forces. Severus, however, was not open to such negotiations.
He just wants the smoke at this point. Like, there's not even conversations.
He not only wanted the northern territories, but he furthermore aimed to see
He wanted genocide. That's what he wants. That's what he's about to say. He wanted genocide.
the Caledonians annihilated.
And we see this so many times in history. Just because, and we're not going to even get into the examples because you guys understand the examples, but because something is so strenuous on leaders, they'll make the binary decision versus compromise.
By 210 AD, Severus had recalibrated his forces, and a chunk of the army was now under the command of his son, Caracalla, who would lead his own campaign beyond the Antonine Wall. It was around this time, allegedly, Emperor Septimus Severus had ordered the genocide of the local Caledonian tribes, and Caracalla was meant to carry this out. Severus had...
And just think about it. If you have Scottish inheritance, if you have Scottish genealogy, genetics, DNA in your blood, a lot of your Scottish genetics came from the survivors of this genocide attempt, this war. Whether they're eventually become migrants and then become Scottish, or like the actual native Scottish people, which there is really no native people anywhere besides Africa. But the symptoms of this war probably has carried over to the DNA of millions of people today, in terms of like who has what DNA, as well as millions of people that weren't never born because of destruction.
then plans to join his son with the remainder of the troops so they could more easily annex Scotland in its entirety. The plan, however, would hit a roadblock when the wily ruler fell ill and opted
so he got sick.
to return for some rest and recuperation. The latter would never happen, though, and Septimus Severus would eventually succumb to his ailment.
He died in Britannia? Wow.
In February of 211 AD, leaving the weight of the invasion now solely on his son and heir to the throne back home.
Weird question. Now, we know where a lot of the English monarchs are buried. We know where a lot of modern day dictators and or emperors are buried. Do we know? I'm going to look this up after this video, but this is just me asking now. Do we know where all these emperors were buried?
As a result, Caracalla saw no wise reason to remain in Caledonia. He swiftly called off the war and began the journey back to Rome, marking the end of the empire's notable attempts to capture the
And I think they could have done it, right? Like if there was just a little bit more time, a little bit more resource, and a little bit more consistency and persistence, they would have easily done it.
Scottish lands. Eventually, due to the lack of Roman interest and efforts, the troops at the northern border were forced to withdraw back to the Hadrian Wall, and instead simply uphold the original border of Roman Britain. No one after Severus would truly try to capture Caledonia, and instead the priority remains the manning and defending of the Hadrian border, once the Caledonians were capable of launching their raids yet again. And the reason why the Romans were okay with this new arrangement,
and I guess it's going to stay that way until the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes invade from, the Germanic area in just a couple hundred years, and then the rest is history, as they say.
And never returns to Scotland with real conquering efforts, can be debated in the details, such as whether terrain played a role or not. But it's undeniable.
Of course it did. The Highlands it's just so hard to traverse.
That Caledonia was simply not worth the Roman time, money, and manpower. There weren't enough natural resources, agriculture, or other benefits to make the brutal war with the locals worth continuing, especially when Rome already had to focus on more pressing issues and conflicts, such as the previously mentioned
The Germania areas.
Dacian War.
Dacian.
So the short answer to why didn't Rome conquer Scotland is simply that they couldn't.
Not that they couldn't. It's that they just didn't have enough time and resource or prioritization towards it. They could have easily done it, and you guys understand that, right? You guys understand that they would have easily done it if they just kept pounding away. Similar story with Ireland, but just a little bit more harder to, you know, you have to send some naval ships over, but you have to land, you have to be conspicuous, you really invest a lot of manpower. And the Roman Empire was, you know, it's just large, and it's very hard to unite that many people under one roof. But yeah, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have a recommendation of a video that we'd like to learn together and react together, I love it. I love it. I love all the recommendations you guys have sent so far. And yeah, if you like these types of videos, if you love history, humanities, and all of that type of stuff, hit that subscribe button, and let's keep learning together. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out. Bye-bye.